All right, chapter 3, functions. You guys are already familiar with some functions that we've worked with so far, things like print, input, the len function, etc., on how you use those. So let me get my screen all adjusted here so that we can get a prompt up and going. There we go, file new. All right. Okay, so we can write our own functions as we go through here. So for example, I want a hello function. I would say def hello, right? And then I can print whatever I want. So hello, this is something like that, right? And then we could do some calculations and say something like print. What is your name? Okay. And then we can have other functions in here. We may have something like def get name. And I'll explain this in more detail here in just a second. I'm just getting her typed up here. So print, let's copy this up here. We would say my name equals the input of like that. Okay. Well, I'll explain a little bit of what we got in these two. We have two different functions. So to define a function, we use the keyword def, D-E-F, all right? Then you give it a name. So we're going to call this one get name, all right? And then you have two parentheses and then a colon. And then after that is all the code that's going to be executed when we call this function. So for this one, it's going to say, what is your name? It's going to gather input from the user, and then it's going to print back to the user hello with their name in it. All right. We also have a second function called hello, which just prints the greeting to our program. All right. And up here at the top, I'm just going to throw in the initial stuff up here just so it's there. Good habit to get into, even when you're practicing, as many of you forgot it on homework assignments. Okay. So I'll let everybody catch up here that's following along with what we got. Right. While that's running, I'm going to go ahead and save this file. We'll just call it week 3 for something, because remember, there's no homework this week, but it's a good place to store it. Okay. So I've got it saved. If I go to run and run module, notice nothing happens on the screen, right? Even though we have print statements and everything else, we run it, nothing happens. And the reason is that even though we have these defined, we never actually call those programs. Does that make sense? So these are just what's functions, and those functions are not being called, therefore they never get executed. So to execute those, I need to type something like hello with parentheses. All right, exactly what's here is what I need to use inside my code. So now if I run this, it will execute that one piece of code and say, hello, this is a function in Python. All right. If I want to call the get name, then below this, I need to call get name. In which case, if I run this, it goes ahead and runs it line by line. I type in JSON, and it accepts it and goes on. All right, the program ends. Does everybody see how these two functions operate? If I call this multiple times, hello, hello, I'm going to get that function called 3 times, which prints it out, and then it goes on to the last function that's down here. So the idea behind functions, the first and foremost reason, is to help compartmentalize your code. Does that make sense? If you want to organize this in a way that I call this get name, and then I have the code specifically for getting the name of the user. The reason I would do this is in my program, if I needed to call that user's option to get their name again, I could do that, right? So say I had something like a menu system down here. Let's do a def menu, right? And I have something like print, let's do this times what, 20, 30, let's call it 30, right? And then we say print option 1, get the username, right? Print 2, get age, print 3, end program. Let's do 0 for that one instead. Okay, if you guys remember when we did this originally, so with this program down here, we would always start with calling our menu, right? And then maybe we have a blank statement in there that just gives us some space. And then we call the menu function so that it goes up, or not menu, sorry, this is hello. And we want to put this in a while true loop so that it shows up the way we would want. So instead of putting the while true there, let's put it down here at the menu. So here we will say this is the start of our program. I am sharing my screen with okay, yep, just double checking. Get nervous now. All right. So this is where our code actually starts. All right. This stuff does not get executed. This is where our program actually starts. We're going to print the hello welcome. We're going to print just a blank space underneath of it so that it gives us a little bit of space below it. And then we're going to start a while true loop in which we have the menu. And that way the user has to pick what they're going to do. This menu just prints the menu out for us. And then we can have an if statement to go ahead and check and see what the user typed in. So we would say if, and in this case, we need to collect from the user. So we'd have something like choice equals input. All right, let's make this a nice clean input. All right, and then so if choice equals 1, we are doing what for 1? Get the user name, right? So in this case, we're going to call get name. And then we have elif choice equals 2. We need get age. And elif choice equals 0. We were going to call print. All right. Kind of fill you in here a little bit of what we did. So we'll import sys. We'll add this at the end. Now, if you guys remember in the program that we did here a week ago, we actually had a whole lot of stuff underneath choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, and it was getting rather lengthy underneath each one of those. So instead of having that code down here in our statements, we can create these functions so that we can just call that function, do that little piece of code, and then return back to our program. All right. Notice that I need a get age up here. So let's collect the user age, def get age. Print, what is your age? My age equals input. Right. And then print, you said your age was something like that. And maybe we create another one down here for print. And this would say something like print 3, print info. Okay. And then that one is to print our name and age. So def print info. your age or your name is okay. All right, I'll let everybody catch up with what we see on the screen here. So again, we're going to start with import the sys module. We're going to have a function called get name that just simply goes through, gathers a name, says it back to the user, and goes on. We have get age, which is going to gather the age of the user and print it out to the screen. We have print info, which is intended to go and print the name and the age in one line, right? We have our hello function and we have our menu function, which is just printing the menu out to the user. This down here is considered our main loop. And what that just means is it's a while loop that's going to keep them in there indefinitely so that they can see the menu inside of there. All right, got somebody in chat. Can you also have functions defined below the function calls? No. So you notice the way I organize this is that you have functions, those go immediately after any imports. So you do your imports, then you do your functions, then you have your main code. While technically, yes, you can define like a function down here, def, whatever, don't do that. That's bad organization. You always want your functions at the top. The reason for that is Python gets executed from the top down, right? So if I didn't define what menu was before I actually called menu, Python would crash. Does that make sense? So the organization in the direction these are is one of those. You also don't want to define functions in the middle of your code either. It should always be defined at the very top. Great question. All right. Does everybody at least have this little piece of code here? So if we run this, we're going to see our nice little menu here. We type in an answer. If I type in something else, notice I don't get an error. So we forgot an else down here, right? So let's fix that. Go down here. Let's do, sorry, this thing's in the way. There we go. Let's put an else in here and print something like, that is not a valid answer. Please try again. There we go. Let's try rerunning this. I type in gibberish and we get that's not a valid answer and it prints over. If I say 1, let's get the user's name, not user name, right? User's name. Save that and rerun here. There we go. So if I hit 1, when I hit 1 and press enter, that down here says go get the username function. It goes up to the username function, starts executing all this code beneath it. So it says now, what is your name? Put in Jason. And it says, well, hello, Jason, hope Python as well. Once this gets here, there's what's called a return. All right. And that return says go back to my program. Now, you can put return in there or it will implicitly go back to your code. Yeah.
What does that else mean?
The else statement just says that's not a valid answer. Please try again.
Like, what, like, return?
It will, we're inside of a loop.
Okay.
That makes sense. So that's why we call this our main loop. It's just going to start this whole thing back over, which is to print the menu first and then start in with our choices going down.
All right.
So we could use this menu here, or we could copy and paste all this stuff like we had down here, right? That's how we showed you last week. The problem is for organization, every time you add a new option, you got to go find it. You got to go add an option, etc. So it's nice to have a nice clean print down here to print that out. So if I do a 1 and I type Jason, you can see that that worked well. If I do 2 to get age, you can see that it now called this get age function. I put in an age and it says I'm 33 and comes back. If I call 3, it says that's not a valid answer, right? Why did we get that? Well, because we didn't put that option in here. So let's add that option. LF choice equals 3. right? And that one should call our print info according to our menu. So print info. All right. Let's try option 1 real quick. We get the name, Jason. We tried 2. What is your age? 33. We got 33 and 3. I hit enter and the program crashes. All right. This is where we're going to start talking about it. So it says my name is not defined. And what this gets us into when we start reading our content over here is def is going to define our function. And then we need the name of the function. And then we have these parentheses. These parentheses allow us to specify some parameter. All right. So when you guys called the print statement here, we passed in what is your name. That is what gets passed into the print function. And in this case, that's what gets displayed on the screen, right? If I pass in this input with this greater than sign, that is the prompt that is for the input function. So every time you have a function, you can pass parameters into that, right? So when I say get name here, we're not passing any parameters in. My age doesn't get a parameter. Print info doesn't get one. Hello doesn't, and menu doesn't. But we need to set this function to accept parameters into it. All right. So for example, print info, we need to accept my age. And we want to accept my name. Okay. When I call it, I now need to call that out here is what is my print info. I need to pass in my name and I need to pass in my age. Does that make sense? This function requires that I pass those two in. Therefore, I need to pass them in down here when I call it. Now, if I run this, it's still going to fail, which we'll find out, because it still has no my name in order for us to do that. Only now it's failing because down here, there's no my name defined. We defined it up here, get name and get age, but we didn't actually define what that was. Does that make sense? So to do that, we need to set a parameter. And if you'll notice on input, we say my age equals whatever we're typing in here as an input, right? That sets this variable. Whatever the output of my input is, now gets stored as my age. So what we need to do is on this get name and get age, we need to specify my name equals get name and my age equals get age. That means whatever the output of get name is going to get stored as my name. The output of get age is now stored as my age. To do that, we need to modify these up here to return specifically my name. On this get age, we need to return my age so that when we store that, it specifies it out. Oops, and this should be a lowercase. All right, I know I talked about a lot there in a short amount of time, so let's look through this. What this is doing is down here, we're setting a variable in our main program. Notice this is in our main loop called my name. That's going to call the function get name. When we call get name, it gathers the input, which is also called my name here, and returns that as my name. All right, this can be a little confusing. Notice how I called this the same as this up here. This is considered a global variable name. All right. This in here is considered a local variable name. Even though I called them the same, they are not the same thing. So it's always better inside of your functions to name them something else while they're in here that does not conflict with the outside. All right. You can do it, but you're not going to get the results you anticipated. So instead of calling this one my name, let's just call it name. And we're going to call this just name. And we're going to return the name out of here. And same way, we're going to change this to just age, age, and age. Everybody see how that works? Both get name and get age, we wanted to change these variable names to name, name, and name, age, age, and age. Okay, somebody else got a question here. Curious, if the user chooses 3 prior to inputting the name and age, Will the program crash or just print undefined variables? You're one step ahead of me, Aaron. But yes, you are correct. Yes, it will crash. And that's what I'm going to explain here in just a second. So if we call choice 1, we have get name. If we call my age here, we get age. And this one is print info, where we pass in my name and my age. So if we run this code now and we press 1, we type in Jason, it prints that out to the user, returned us back to the main menu. If I do 2 at get age, I pass in an age, it says it's there. And if I press 3, you can see it took the output of those 2 and passed them into the print info, which then comes up here and stores them as the same name. So when I pass these 2 into there, I can call them the same thing here as my age and my name, and that order matters. So look at what I did here. I called this my name and I called this my age, right? Does everybody see how that worked? I'm calling print info, I'm passing in my name, and I'm passing in my age. When I do that, when it comes up here to the function, it's assigning the variable of the first one that's input as my age. It's assigning the second variable as my name. What's the problem with that? Look at our output over here. Your name is 33 and your age is Jason. So the reason that happened is because when you pass in parameters, those are in a very specific order. So the first one that gets typed in is my name. The second one that gets typed in is my age. If I come up here, it says the first one we accept is my age and my name. I got to flip them around to get the right results. So if I switch this to my age and my name, now it matches what's up here. And therefore, when it connects those down here, these are all going to line up correctly. So again, I rerun this. 1, get my name. And the name is Jason. 2, we get an age. 3, and now it's actually your name is Jason and your age is 33. So what I'm demonstrating there is that the parameters that you pass in here are in a very specific order as you pass them in. If you guys remember when we dealt with the range function, right? What was the first thing, the first number that we passed in? Everybody remember the range function we were playing with early on? We had range. What was the first number? Well, where we start, right? So if you notice down here in this explanation, it says the first number is where we start. The second number is what? Where we stop. And the third number is our stepping, right? So it's whatever we want to step by. So if we want to go by 2s, we put in a 2 for that one. So if we did 1, 10, 2, that tells us that we are starting at 1, we go to 10, up to 10, but not including, and 2 steps us all the way through there, just giving us all the what? Odds in this case, because we started at 1. But yes, same concept. All right. Same thing. When we wrote our function up here, the first one is now my age. The second one is my name. If we pass in something that is not defined, so I pass in something like choice, right? And I run this and I call number 3. Well, 1, I'm going to get an error because age is not defined and my name is not defined, right? So this is what Aaron was just talking about is if we don't execute 1 first, then 2, then 3, if we just go straight to 3, we're going to get an error that name and age was never defined to begin with. Does everybody see that? So we may not want to display this choice of 3 unless we have already collected my name and age, or maybe we want to put in placeholders for those, right? So we could say something like my name equals an empty string and my age equals an empty string. And then we can collect 1 and then we can collect that information, store it, and then go 3. Does anybody see an issue with this main loop that I just created? Yeah, what do we got, Gage?
If you like put in your choice for number one, it'll repeat the while true loop and replace the name of page.
Exactly. So where we put this placeholder matters, right? If we put it inside of our while true loop, well, then every time we start this loop back over, it resets the name and age out of there. So we want to take this out and put this up here at the start of our program. Just store this as my name and my age. Great catch. See, everybody's learning already. Making steps. All right, so the idea here is we're going to start with my name as an empty string, my age as an empty string. And what that allows us to do, if we run our code and we press 3, now we're going to get a different error. And that is because print info takes 2 positional arguments, meaning that we specifically said 1 argument, 2 argument, but we gave it 3. Remember, we passed in choice here. And so if we give it more than what this function was designed for, the program will crash. All right, so we need to take out choice and we just run name and age. And so now if we call 3 from the very beginning, you'll see that your name is blank, your age is blank. If we want to fill those, we have to call 1 and we can see your name is Jason. It stores that. We can print 3 right away. And we can see that now Jason is stored in the system. All right. If we use age to get age, and we hit 3 for print info, we can see that it stored both of those and it saved that information. Everybody see how that all works? Okay. Now here, when we pass this in, I said print info, my age and my name. And when I pass these in here, I have my age and my name. The thing is I can call these whatever I want, right? So I could go back to just calling this age, and I can go back to calling this name. And what happens is whatever variable I pass in from here is now going to be defined as the name age, which means inside of here, I just call this age. And inside of here, I call this just name. And if we run this code, you'll notice that when I call 3, I don't have anything set. If I call 1 and I say Jason and I do 3, notice that Jason is stored correctly and it's printing it correctly. So how does that work? It's grabbing the global variable, my name. We're passing that into the print info function. Inside the print info function, we are renaming that variable age. And then we're actually using that variable in here. This is called a global variable. So we're going to store these as our global variables. All right. These up here are called our local variables. So when we're executing this code inside the function, these are called our local variables. Note, this variable name is not the same as this variable up here called name, because this name is only local to this function. All right. This concept of global and local is where we tend to lose a lot of people. So global variables are things that are run out here in the main program. All right. Local variables are inside of functions that we created. If we name them the same, it's only going to be what's inside the function at the time we're executing is what that is. All right. If we execute it on the outside, then it changes that function. Notice on these, we don't have any returns. We don't need a return. The implicit return is just to go return back to the menu. Here, we specifically wanted to return the variable name, and we wanted to specifically return the variable age. All right. Instead of returning these variables and specifying like we do here, what we could do is call get name, and we'll call just get age. And inside of our functions, we're going to say global my age, or in this one's my name rather. And in my age, we're going to call global my age. Now what that does is that goes and grabs the global variable, and then we can modify that inside of our function. So we would say something like my name again, and my name here. and we do not need to return anymore. We need an age, and we'll go back to my age. And the reason that you would do it in this fashion is this allows you to modify a global variable, right? So we no longer have to define those down here and override what was here and all of that. This accesses whatever my name is over here. We can see that. So to check and see what I'm talking about, if we just print my name, right? And we print my age, and we run this. The first time I call get name, or let's just call 3 first, right? They're wiped out. Notice how they're empty right now. Those variables don't have anything. If we print 1 and we put in a name of Jason, all right, it's stored Jason. And if we hit 3, it's stored Jason correctly. If I call get name first and press 1, notice how it printed Jason out here because that's what we told it to do. So instead of this, let's make this a little easier to understand. Let's print current name is set to plus my name. Right? And let's do this same thing on age. Current name is set, or current age rather. All right, let's run that code real quick. And so now if we press 1, it says the current name is set to, and then it's empty, right? What is your name? I say Jason. It says, well, hello, Jason. Hope Python is going well. I press 1. Now it says my current name is set to Jason. It's pulling from the global variable we set and storing and pulling that into our function. All right. So local variables are the ones that we use inside of here. If we want to manipulate a global variable, which means it's usable in all of our functions, same way here. Instead of pressing print info in, which is kind of cumbersome, let's not use global. Let's use global variables my name and global variables of my age. And then all we have to do is print those out directly. My name and my age. Down here, we take out our print info and we just pass those in. So I've showed you, I'm bouncing around a little bit on showing you how you use those. And you can do that depending on what you want to collect. But if you're wanting to reuse information in your little functions up here, it's best to use the global variables if you specify them. Or if you want to share those variables between functions, you must use global variables, right? I cannot share local variables between functions. I can only share global variables. But the only way I can access that global variable is by saying global and then whatever variable I want to access. We will revisit this again at midterm, but this is the #1 question missed on the midterm. In order to, given the variable name, my name, how would I access that globally? And the answer is global my name. If you just say global, that's not correct, right? We're not pulling in a variable name. That's just a keyword. You have to specify what that variable name is. All right. I know it's a lot of glazed eyes now, and what in the world are we all talking about? All right. Yeah, there's lots of stuff to get lost here. So this week we'll rewatch the video, also rewatch the older videos because I present those in a different way than I've done this semester. All right. Do you still need to set my name and my age to empty strings? In this case, you do if yes, because these two are going to be pulling these in. And if you don't, then there's no variable name. Therefore, it's going to fail on those. For example, we could just comment this out and try it. Run, 1, and it fails. Great question. So let's take these back out so they are not commented, and then we should be able to execute the code, run, 1, and it goes on. Okay. So the key things to learn with functions is the idea behind a function is it's for you to containerize little pieces of your code, right? Make it easier to read. If I want to go change my age right now, or the question on how to ask my age, I can go straight to this function called get age. I don't have to dig inside of a bunch of code down here. All right. The real kicker is notice how get name I can call multiple times and I can change my name, right? So if I say my name is Jason and I hate 3 and it says my name's Jason, oh, I made a typo. I want to redo that. I can call 1 and I can say my name is now Gage and it's going to pull up and say my info is now Gage. So I can reuse that code and not have to tell my program, copy and paste this to go ahead and set my name. What is my name? It re-asks those same questions over and over and over. So the real purpose behind functions is anytime you start to see repetitive code in your program, that's probably a good place for you to use a function in order to do that. That makes sense? So use it for organization. Use it for any time you're starting to see, I am copying and pasting the same code over and over. I should probably be using a function to do that. All right. Inside a function, as we said before, you have things called parameters. This is what you can pass in. If you look at the parameters for a print function, let's just try print here. Notice that the parameter is whatever we type in, that's what's going to get printed. There's also a parameter called sep, which is space by default. There is also a parameter called end, which is a new line character, one called file and one called flush. All right. The difference with these is those are specified with generic. So by default, there's one called sep, which is a separator of a space. If you guys have probably already used this, and it would be something like, let's come down here to the end, do something like print, and then you guys could do something like my name, comma, my age, and that, if I print this, it's going to have a space between those two variables, right? That's because there's an implicit print as the separator space. But if I overwrite that, if I say comma sep equals an asterisk, and let's put 5 of them in there just for fun. Then if I run this code and I use, let's see, we got to get past our menu, right? So let's do 1 Jason. See how we got the word Jason in here and all asterisks? It combined my name and it combined my age. Well, my age is empty, so let's set our age to 33. Now it combined Jason and age, but it separated them by all of our asterisks because that's what we said we wanted to separate it by. All right. So you can override and specify this. Notice how it went down to a new line immediately. Maybe we want to change after every print, and this is our end. Instead of adding a new line, maybe we wanted to just end with a couple parentheses going through there, right? That is a horrible thing to show as a demo, but it'll work. So if we run this, now we say 1, Jason, 2, 33. It took Jason, it separates them with the asterisks and ends that line with a bunch of parentheses, but notice how it printed the next line right after it, right? It'll just keep printing on the same line until it gets to a new line character. So this can get a little messy when you do new or ends here. But say that we wanted to always print a new line, and some of you guys asked this on the homework. Let's go back to just my age and my name here. And you say you always wanted to give it 2 new lines every time you printed. You'd use something like new line, new line, new line. That would give us 3. And so now every time it prints, it's always going to give us 3 new lines afterwards. What I forget here, comma. All right, so get username 1, Jason, 2, 33. Now after Jason, it's always going to print new lines after each one of these. Okay. In this case, it's 1 new line, 2 new line, 3 new line, and then we have 2 spaces in between. So some of you were asking, how can we give it more space after this? You could, in the bottom of every print statement, just add an extra new line, right? That new line character is going to get interpreted. It's going to wrap. And then there's an implicit new line, which then gives you a blank space after it. So for example, let's get rid of all this stuff down here that we did. And if we look at our output of our program, it says hello function, hello, right? I told it to print a new line here. Let's take that out. But let's go up here to our hello. Let's put 3 new lines in there. 1, 2, and then we're going to get the implicit one that's already built in. So if we run this, notice how we get this nice 2 lines before it goes down and actually prints our menu. Say we wanted to print this at the bottom of our menu, which we probably should, right? And then we wanted to make sure that it always printed 3 new lines after that. We could print new line, new line, new line. Oops, something like that. And that would give us 3 lines after our menu so that we get some nice space in between there. It reads easier, it's cleaner, etc. Yeah.
Why is it giving the new line if it's like being told to act as a string?
Because it's interpreting the /new line. So if you want it not to interpret those are called special characters, and we'll talk about that here in the upcoming weeks. If we don't want it to interpret that and just actually print /n, then we have to escape those characters. Okay, and we'll talk about that when we get into manipulating strings. For now, I don't want to go that deep. Okay, so when you call a function, we define a function. We need to call the function, meaning down here, we have to actually call the menu. This will never print if we never call that function. All right. Hint, hint, wink, wink. This may or may not be on a quiz question. All right. Meaning we can define a function all we want, but if we don't call it, it never happens. You have to call the function in order for it to get executed. All right. We can call it, we can pass arguments in, or we can pass parameters in, like what we did when we were playing earlier with the my name and age and all that stuff. All right. We talked about return values. In this case, earlier, we were telling it to return values back. By default, it returns nothing. It just returns back to the main function. All right. There may be a reason that you wanted to return something special. So if you guys remember in the first week, you guys were calculating ages, right? Multiply, subtract, whatever. You may do a function that goes and does a bunch of calculations on the age and then returns the final age. That would be a good place to use a return. Right? If we look at this example here, we could use a function called getAnswer, right? And we're passing in some number. And down here, it's saying pick a random number, and that's just going to randomly get us one of these answers. If it was 1, return it certain. Instead of printing it, we return it. All right. If we return this string, then we have to print it inside of here. A none value by default, it always returns none, which means there's nothing there. All right. In Python, you can use none as a value or a data type, which just means it's none. It has no value, not an empty string, just nothing. All right. So if we say something like none equals spam, that's true because spam itself is none. There's no value to it. All right. We talked about the print statement, or the print function rather, and its extra parameters. So we can end with, if we want to end with spaces, as opposed to new line characters, you say end equals, and then whatever you want to pass in. All right. If we give 3 parameters, which some of you guys were doing this in homework 1, notice this is not string concatenation, right? It's printing each one of these values, and then there's implicitly a space in between, not a comma. So if we wanted to do a comma separation of each one of those values, we would say sep equals a comma, and then it's going to give us the comma separated value of that. I blew everybody away with functions today, right? Got real quiet in here. All right. What you don't want to do, and this is what it's talking with call stacks, is notice I put this into a main while loop down here, right? You don't want to call functions from within functions. This is where your guys' midterms are going to go really, really poorly. All right. If you call functions within functions as a program, it's going to start at the top, call that function. call back, call back. So instead of doing this, in other words, we don't get at the end of this and call menu again, right? To reprint the menu. Because if we did that, now it's going to go call the menu function, then it'll execute, go back to the while menu, then print it again. In other words, you can get really, really nested in your functions. Don't try to call functions from within functions. All right. This will make more sense as you guys start writing. The first thing everybody does is try to call functions and functions, and then they are super, super lost. All right. What other highlights are out here? We talked about local scope and global scope. Can we use locals from other locals? So can I use a variable in this function inside this function? No, right? We can't use locals inside of locals. If we want to use something between two functions, what do we use? The global variable, right? We want to define a global variable so that we can use it between multiple functions. Talk about the global statement. I want to see if there was anything we missed this week. Okay. At the very end of this, we can do exception handling. All right. Exception handling allows us to check for an error. If we get an error, bring something back to the user so your program doesn't crash. Aha, now we have a way of seeing whether or not somebody's typing in a number now, right? So when we said this age, if you guys remember, although we're not doing any math to it, right? So let's do some math with this age. Print in 10 years, your age will be, right? We remember that we have to create a string, right? We need to take our integer of whatever our my age is. And then we need to add 10 to that. And that whole thing then has to become a string, right? Now, if I run this, and I still never closed it. What did I miss here? One more. There we go. If I type in an age of 2, let's do an age 2, everything works. It says in your age, it'll be 12, right? Well, what if I do 2 and I type in gibberish, right? You guys remember this, where it tries to convert that gibberish to an integer right here, and it fails because it can't convert it. So what we want to do is make sure that that user is actually typing in a valid number. So we could wrap this in a try. If you guys remember, we want to always gather input from a user. Let's just go to our main loop before we deal with age. Bounce around here. Let's go back. Forgive me. Let's take this out of here. Okay. Down here, if you remember, we're comparing this to choice 1, 2, 3 as strings. We could do this as a integer. And if we wanted to make sure that we typed in something, we would say something like, hold on, let me get some example code in my head here before I get everybody confused even further. All right, let's go back to age. We are going to try to convert this over to an integer. So we would say int my age, right? And we could just print that for the time being. Print int my age, say plus 10. And we got to convert that over to a string. So let's do string. Okay. All right. Real quick, let me just go back and do it. It's the same thing that we had before. I just messed up. Okay, so we have 2. What is your age? 2. It prints out 12 at the end, right? If I type in gibberish on this one for number 2, it's going to crash. So what we do is we wrap this in a try statement, try, and we say, try to print this. If we get an exception, except we print, you did not type a valid age, all right? Now, if we run this code and we type in number 2 to get our age, and I type in gibberish, it says you did not type a valid age. But notice how it kicked us back to the menu, right? What we should do is gather a valid age from the user. So we need to make sure what they're typing in is valid. So what we can do is wrap this input in a while loop of its own. So if we say while true, we're going to tell them what their current age is. We're going to gather the input. And as soon as we gather that input, the first thing we want to do is try to convert that to an integer. All right. So if we say my age equals int of my age, right? This would tell us whether or not that can be converted to an integer. If we do that, we need to wrap that in a try and except. So we would do something like try this. If that doesn't work, we would say except, and we could say this is not a valid age. Let's just take this out. We're moving things around here a little bit. There we go. All right, so what this is going to do is in this while loop, we're going to ask for their age. We're going to try to convert that to an integer. If that fails, we're going to say that is not a valid age. What this does is this prevents this error from ever happening. Right? Now, on this exception, we need to say continue so that it returns back here and asks them what their current age is and goes down. If this works, we need to make sure we break out of our while loop, right? So if this works, well then, okay, they typed in a real age, then we can break out. If not, we need to print that that's not a valid age and start that while loop back over. So let's try this now. And on 2, we type in 3, and we get you can't concatenate. Why did I try to concatenate? Oh, we converted it here, right? This needs to go back to a string. Okay. Try that again here. Sorry about that. 2, get age. What is your age? We said it was 33, and this all worked like we expected, right? If I try to type in gibberish, why did I get it 2? All right, stand by. I'm screwing something up here. This is not what we want. Okay. Instead of setting that to an integer, we need to try if int my age, right? Then we can go ahead and break. And we can tell them what that was. So let's do this. Stay this line, put this in here. And this just stays my age. All right, I'll explain what happened there. So because in our try, it tries to execute the code below it. If it works, it goes on, right? Well, the problem was at that point, we converted our string to an integer for the rest of our program. That's why this eventually crashed. So instead, we can use an if statement and say if int of my age, which means convert that over to an integer, right? If my int my age, and that works, then we can print your age was this, but that doesn't change my age to an actual integer. It just tried to convert it up here. Does everybody's follow along with what I did there? So if I run this now, and I say 2, and I say 33, and I hit 2, it says your current age is 33. What's your age now? 34. Your age is 34. If I do 2, but I type in gibberish, it says you did not type a valid age. Your current age is set to gibberish. What's your age? So what's the problem with that? It stored what we typed in as gibberish, right? So to change that, instead of our input being directly set to my age, why don't we just call this age? All right. And if int my age works, then we're going to set something like my age is equal to age. Does everybody see why it makes more sense? We're going to gather an input from the user called age. We're going to try to convert, this should be age as well, by the way. Try to convert that to an integer. If that works, then we need to set our global variable of my age to whatever they typed in. All right, and then you can set this as my age for that final variable. That way, if I type in gibberish, I'm not overwriting what that was. So if I say 2, right, I say my age is 33. You said your age was 33. All right, change that. I'm now doing gibberish. You did not type a valid age. It's still set to 33 as it was before. Right, we didn't end up changing it because we hit our try and accept. So the idea that I'm explaining here is try and accept is a way for you to validate what a user is typing in, particularly for numbers, right? If we try to convert this on an if to an integer, if this works, then do something. If it does not work, in this case, we do nothing and it starts the loop back over. Which means from here on out, when you guys gather numbers in your program and you're asking specifically for a number, you now have a way of testing that to make sure it's valid. Does that make sense? All right, in your errors, when we got this error up here, we got a type error, right? Up here, we got a type error. Up here, we got a value error. See how these are all different types of errors? On this exception, we can accept on everything, right? This is a global catch-all for accept. However, if we wanted to specifically check a value error, we can accept on a value error. If we wanted to have a different exception for a type error, we can have another exception down here for type error, etc. It's kind of like elif and else, right? Except with nothing in there is a catch-all. It'll catch any exception and give us this output as opposed to dumping this error on the screen. So the whole idea behind try and accept is we're going to try to run code. If everything runs, great. If it fails, let's give them a valid error instead of the program crashing. Anybody got any questions on try and accept statements? All right. That gives us some sample programs, practice questions. Okay, so at the very bottom here, you're going to get practice projects. This is going to allow you to test the stuff that you got from me. All right. And by me, I mean, I think I horribly explained today's lesson. All right. I don't know what it was different about this semester, but I can see by the deer in the headlight look by most of you in here that functions did not go well today. All right. What does that mean? Go watch the videos from last year. All right. Watch this video. You guys are probably going to need to get it readdressed, but go watch the video from last year because I guarantee I presented differently. And I apologize for doing so horribly today because I am seeing a whole lot of deer in headlights. It's fine. That just means I didn't get that right. I'm lost in a box. Yep, totally understand. All right. So if you are lost and don't know functions, functions are a key piece. You need to know how to use functions. Go out and watch the video from last year. You'll have that. I'm guessing somebody's on Discord going, this guy is nuts. Am I right? That what's going on? All right. So go out and watch the video from last year. If you go out to this section here as well, let me move this down here. There's also a section out here called old videos. You guys can also access the videos from a couple of years now. All right. Sometimes I explain it great. Sometimes I'm horrible about it. Watch a couple different videos, which reminds me, some of you didn't get videos from last week. If you were in a special online section, for whatever reason, it blacked out some students from getting that. I don't know why. That's gone now. If you subscribe to the playlist that's out there on YouTube for this year, then you will always get those access to those videos. So even if it didn't show up on Blackboard, you would obviously get the alert from YouTube on that. So how do you get to that real quick? If you go out here and you click on this video, right? And let's not watch HelloFresh, but we go down here. You will see that this is part of a playlist. This is from spring of last or 2 years ago. You could click on this and you get out here and you get the whole playlist from that year. This year, if you want to get the playlist, you can go out to just the name, which I think is me. Yay. And you can look at my playlists and you're going to have a playlist for every one of these classes. This is your fall one, not that one. This one is all the videos for this class. All right. Everybody kind of understand functions? No. Right. All right. Practice, practice, practice. So what that means is we will cover this again on Thursday. All right. We'll reiterate the pieces of it that you guys need to remember on how to write functions. In your midterm project, you are required to write functions. All right. So when I say it's required that you have functions in your program, you have to have functions like this. I'm not looking for functions that do this where they just print, right? I want you to actually do something with the function, such as get your name and get your age. Something. Depends on what your program is, but something. Use functions to organize code. What's the other reason to use functions? Repeating, minimize code. All right. The whole idea behind functions is to minimize your code. Everybody's lost, aren't they? All right. How about online? Are you guys, I know a couple of you are lost. And again, don't feel like you're lost. The only way you're going to get functions is to write little mini functions and try it in your program. All right. Always define your functions at the top, up here, before you execute your main code down below. Don't write a function out in the middle of your code. All right. I apologize for the deer in headlight look at everybody in here, but rewatch those videos from those other semesters. I guarantee I do a better job. I don't know why today was so horrible, but it was.
Watch all of us go back and watch it. It's funny the exact same way.
I assure you I did not. I assure you I did not explain it the same way. All right.
Word for word, the exact.
Yep. I assure you I never use the same words in 2 semesters the same. I think I jumped the gun a couple times today because I wanted to show you some cool stuff and then that got us way out of the loop. So, all right, I'm going to stop this recording.